Hey, how's it going? Jossie here. In this video, I'm going to be talking about some tips on how to survive getting trained as a healer in RPGs. I'm not going to be talking about how to use your cooldowns or your abilities or whatever. We already know that, okay? In this video, I'm assuming you already know how to do all that stuff. So basically, use your abilities obviously to survive. So what I am going to be talking about though is actually the difference between RPGs and arenas, alright? There's really a big difference between the two. So in RPGs, first of all, there's up to 10 targets potentially targeting you at the same time, as opposed to 3. And of course, the bigger difference is that you actually have 2 healers to back you up, right? You're not just on your own. So I think truly understanding these two main differences is what's going to help you survive in RPGs if you're used to arena or just used to PvP in general. So the first tip I want to give is actually to dispel CC off of your healers, right? Off of your ally healers, not yourself, because you can't dispel CC off yourself, obviously, but of the 2 other healers that are in a team fight with you. And it may seem a little counterintuitive at first, right? You're thinking oh, I'm being chained and being killed right now, right? And instead of healing yourself, you're actually going to be dispelling others. So when you're being trained, right, you can't really risk casting. When there's multiple DPS on you, you're not going to be able to fake all their kicks, right? Maybe you can get 1 or 2, but there's no way you're going to fake 5 kicks. So because of that, the other healers on your team who are in team fight with you actually have a higher healing output than you do, right? So with that in mind, right, so if you're caught in some big damage, if you're being trained and stuff and you can't stop to heal, what you actually should be doing is looking at your healers and seeing if they're in CC, right, and just throw them a dispel. And it's just 1 GCD and it's uninterruptible, and it's going to lead to a lot more healing coming your way as long as they know what they're doing, of course. But unfortunately, you just have to rely on them at that point. This situation is actually more common than you might think, right? Actually, the only time that you're really in risk of dying as a healer yourself is when your other healers are in CC. And you might not notice that, but that's almost always the case. So, next time you're being trained really hard, actually take a quick look at your frames, look at your other healers and see if they need to be dispelled. And that should be your first priority always when you're being trained and could be dying damage. All right, the second tip I want to give is actually about communication, right? So not really an ability or anything you can use or anything you do in game, but something you can do out of game, right? And obviously communication is really nice because it costs nothing at all to use, right? No GCDs, no mana. All you gotta do is just talk a little bit. And the way you use it when you're being trained is super simple. Just call out for help if you need it. It sounds obvious, it sounds intuitive, but you'd be surprised at how many healers don't do this when it's necessary. In an RPG situation, there's 10v10 and it's just way too hectic on the map. You can't expect everyone to know what's going on at the same time. You can't expect your healers and your DPS to know when you're in trouble. Or you have to be the one to tell them and to call for help. If you're being trained by melees, ask for peels, right? If you're caught in a stun without trinket, ask for external. If you just can't serve the damage, you can ask for just more healing focus on top of you. Basically, what I'm saying is when there's 3 or 4 DPS on you, it's really not your fault if you die. That's actually how it is. One healer is supposed to be able to survive so many DPS, right? So it's a responsibility of your teammates to help you in that situation. And you want to make it as easy as possible for them, right? So you tell them exactly oh, Jossie needs help right now. Even better if you call for specific things. You tell them you need a bark skin, if you tell them you need specific healing, you need peels. The more vocal you are and more specific you are and calling for help, makes a higher chance you're actually going to get and help and survive that attack. All right, the third tip I'm going to give here, and the last tip I have, is about positioning. This is something that you notice night and day, especially with arena players. So most arena players actually do this pretty well, but I think a lot of players who just get high rated in RPGs and don't play much arena don't make use of this enough, right? So positioning is super important in surviving as a healer. Right, there's a couple of things you want to watch out for. First of all, you want to be together with your ranged DPS, preferably in the back, right? So if this is your ranged DPS, you're standing together with them. This is the enemy melees and your melees, and the enemy DPS, ranged DPS are farther out. So in this kind of situation like this, you can't be hit by the ranged DPS, right? Unless they come all the way into the main middle team fight where they're going to risk being killed. And the melee can't come to you without being out of range of their healers. So always stay back. Another thing to watch out for, actually, which some people don't know about in arena as well, is that you can't stack with your other healers, right? So you and your other healers need to be a little bit split apart because there's tons of AoE CCs going out, Solar Beams and Shadow Furies, Psychic Fury even, that if you stack with the healers and 3 of you get CC'd in one spell, that's really big trouble. Honestly, someone's gonna die immediately if you get triple root beamed. And then the last part of positioning is, of course, using the pillars. So in RPGs, It's not as defined as in arenas where there's nice pillars to hide behind, but there's always something. In every place where there's a team fight, there's always a building or a wall or something that you can hide behind, and that's exactly where you should be as a healer, right? Don't be out in the open. You don't want to be able to like be polymorphed or something or feared, right? Just standing where you are. Like you have to make them work for it, right? So you hide behind pillars, and you can come out and peek out and heal your allies, and then you get back behind your pillar, right? Because you don't always need to be in line of sight of everybody, and the less line of sight you have to the enemy, the less damage they're actually dealing to you. You follow these line of sight tips, and what's going to happen is if anyone wants to attack you, any of the melee DPS or range DPS, they're going to follow way back out of line of sight, right? Behind pillars of their healers and their DPS, and your DPS and your team are just going to be able to kill them. And basically they just can't come after you at this point, right? The further back you pull out and behind the pillar, the more dangerous it is for the enemies to follow you. Now, the risk, of course, of staying back and behind pillars is if your teamates don't play well with you, right? Like if you're staying back to range DPS and your melee, boom, jump out and chase the enemy healers, chase the enemy RDPS, and you outrange your healing them, honestly, that's not your fault and it's not your responsibility. You should tell them to come back, right? Tell them to stop going out too far. Like if they go out and die, don't come out to chase them, right? If you come all the way out here into the melee middle team fight to heal your melee DPS who ran away, you risk dying. And like losing the healer in a team fight usually is just unrecoverable in a team fight is so much more important than losing DPS where they can, revive after 25 seconds. And unfortunately, I think at like lower ratings, it's probably inevitable. You're not going to convince them to come back and you're just going to go out. In that kind of situation, maybe you go out and put yourself in a bit of danger to keep your team alive. But I think preferably like just tell them to come back and don't go out after them. So there you have it. These are the three, in my opinion, the biggest tips actually to staying alive in RPGs as a healer, especially when you're being trained. Once again, I intentionally left out the basics such as like use instant cast heals or use your cooldowns like pin suppress or whatever. That kind of stuff is obvious, right? I expect you already know that kind of thing. Like just use your abilities whenever you need to. But I do hope that this was helpful for you. I hope you learned something. Next time you're being trained, try to keep this in mind. And honestly, I'm pretty sure it's going to make a big difference for you. So let me know what you think. Like and subscribe if you like the content. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.